Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Bruce Pearson here with you on Jersey Talk Radio. We are live right now in Morristown, New Jersey. Once again, we're at the Jersey Access Group Conference, and I'm very lucky right now to have the opportunity to speak with one of the keynote speakers. You're a panel member. You're an executive in an overriding organization that works with this community of service providers in the telecommunications industry. And I'd like to welcome Steve Traylor with us. And you're the executive director of NATOA, right?
Correct.
Tell our listeners who aren't involved in the industry or aren't involved in community access television what NATOA is and what they do, if you would.
Okay, well, NATOA is actually the National Association of Telecommunications Officers and Advisors. We're a nonprofit association out of Washington, D.C., and we lobby on behalf of local governments on communications policies. So everything ranging from PEG, which we're dealing with today, to broadband adoption and deployment, to public safety communications, anything and everything in between.
We're going to have a little competition here from this. We are on the vendor floor. There's about 50 vendors and hundreds of people in here attending. So for our listeners, please bear with us. It's kind of the nature of live television and radio. Clearly, anybody that's a consumer of content in radio, television, computers, social media understands that there are enormous and game-changing changes taking place in the communications industry almost on a daily basis. It's hard to keep up with the trends and the movement of social media and how that's taken a forefront approach. So clearly, based on 20 years ago, when you pretty much had a static playing field of community access television groups and so forth, your job has gotten just monumentally more complex with a lot of things happening at once and a lot of societal changes that are driven by this technology. Could you kind of, first of all, tell me a little bit about your background, how you came to be involved in this, and then secondly, let's talk about the big picture of what's going on in telecommunications, if you would, and share with the listeners, what some of your challenges are that you guys have to deal with every day.
Okay, my background is pretty simple. I'm an attorney. I was practicing law in Sacramento, California as a deputy city attorney for Sacramento. So I started getting exposed to some of these type of issues. And then I went to work for the League of California Cities. And they're, just sort of like NATOA. They advocate on behalf of cities in California. So I really got into the association world. And an opening came up in D.C., and here I am. And I've been here next month, 6 years as executive director. I guess the way to sum everything up in the telecommunications world is like in one word, and it's disruption. And that's what everyone is talking about, disruption of the industry. And really probably the big factor in that is the presence of the internet. Everything is the internet nowadays. Your cable television, your phone systems, everything that you used to get from different providers all seem to be coming from one company now. You go to Comcast for your video, you get your phone, you get your internet. So it's really changed the way things are going now. Along with disruption, I guess the biggest disruption is what you call your cable cord cutters. The folks that no longer subscribe to a cable service, they want to get things over the top. They want to see programming when and where and how they want to. The idea of sitting on your couch on Sunday night at 7 a.m. watching, The Wonderful World of Disney, those days are gone. People don't watch TV at set times anymore. And that's really what's disrupting this particular marketplace, is how do you still get your content out to the folks that you want to serve and communicate with and keep track of what's going on. And along with that, the whole issue is how does regulation keep up with technology?
You bring up a lot of things that I've been saying in my 41 years in the industry that are real game changers. I mean, I used to think of you watch Bonanza at 5:30 on a Sunday when I was a kid, or you didn't watch it. The content consumption trends go further and further towards handheld devices, mobile devices, more on demand. It really is almost irrelevant unless you're watching, a space shuttle launch or the Super Bowl when the program is taped or when it happens. It really doesn't really matter because generally, and certainly the issue of cable cutting with the millennials is becoming epidemic. 200,000 to 300,000 is the last number I read not too long ago, and I follow these trends. Binge watching, unheard of. You know, even when people that were hardcore VHS tape recorder people, they didn't watch 30 episodes of, you know, Dragnet.
No.
So all of those things add up to really very basic changes in the whole communication process. And you know, I think the other side of this coin in terms of the service that JAG provides on a hyper-local level is the fact that there are fewer and fewer local news outlets. The newspapers are all but done, whether they like it or not, whether they're major or weeklies or local. Local radio stations are mostly just rebroadcast of, you know, half a dozen network hats that are syndicated anymore. So you don't have that local community, you know, early morning drive time, community-oriented radio that you had. So that's gone. So in an odd way, where in my observation, the community access channels were hanging on by their teeth and were never given the due funding or attention that they should have had for years. And everybody, you know, as they said, you know, the reports of my demise were greatly exaggerated. Now they're in the driver's seat to a great extent because they do have worldwide distribution, inexpensive distribution costs, high quality capability. It's no longer lousy cameras, you know, with trailing and terrible lighting and so on. Right. You've got high def and the fact that it's archived so people can consume it. This is a basic human desire. I want to do what I want, when I want, as I want. Certainly your background, you know, working in the Capitol in California, I'm sure you saw a lot of the influence that politics throws into this cauldron of changes and competing forces. So tell me what your experience has been in the last 6 years in terms of government. I mean, the FCC, and I'm an old first-class broadcast engineer, the FCC it's almost irrelevant today, is it not? I mean, the whole waters of whether they control cable, they control the internet, they don't. Is that a fair statement to make?
Yeah, well, you know, in a way, things have changed so much, as you said. You used to have nice little silos where everything used to fit. So you'd have cable under Title VI, you'd have phone service under Title II, so forth and so on. And it was easier, I guess, to be a regulator at that time because you could craft regulations for those particular industries and how they operated. But like I said, those lines have totally disappeared. You know, the silos have come down, at least on the technical side, between these various services. So that's what the big thing is. And like you said, you know, you don't sit down and watch programming the way that you used to. Local news really is old stuff by the time you watch it at nighttime. You've seen the headlines on your phone.
That's, you know, I had the opportunity to broadcast the DC area SMPTE convention out at, what was the, Maryland Shore, I forget the name of the beach town there. Last year. It was an eye-opener for 5 days because we had head of facilities development for Al Jazeera speak. We had head of news distribution for ABC. Excuse me. That moneymaker, the cash cow for broadcasters, but also the highest cost of production, is going away, and they are extremely concerned. It was very evident that, as you said, people will say, I want to see that story about Egypt Air. They'll pick it up off, and they won't watch the whole newscast. The tradition of sitting down watching a half-an-hour newscast with Eric Severide doing his editorial and a little bar on the bottom, that's far gone. People will pick and choose the story. They'll pick one thing from RT and another from Sky News and another from ABC. This is all going away. The high-priced talent, you know, a pretty face reading somebody else's text off the prompter is done. Very viral newscast, immediacy. This stuff is all gone.
I mean, you know, the thing, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
if
you look at your evening newscasts, and I'm still one of those guys that occasionally do.
I don't do it.
I occasionally do.
I can't stand it anymore.
But the thing is, take a look at the commercials that are on during the newscast.
Right.
They are all geared towards
Aging
old folks
population.
like me.
Yeah.
Everyone.
It's the 2-minute spot for, you know, the medicine for
Various
joint pain. Exactly.
ailments. Yes.
And that's an interesting point, because along with all of this, the microcasting that we're facing, and I started as a newsman in New Mexico, has changed the marketing. It has changed, you know, they used to, and there's still some of the networks, some of the cable networks, that will not allow, for example, Sci-Fi squashes everything that's on there on the net, because they want to drive you to their site to buy them. Well, that's ridiculous, because most of the other broadcasters have understood that it really doesn't matter when the consumer sees the commercial, as long as the consumer sees the commercial. Mm-hmm. So if it's embedded in the show and they're binge watching, you know, 500 times the number of people that used to, right, let them do it. But you're absolutely right. You don't see a lot of Toyota commercials for young families buying an SUV on the evening news, because we're flushing that content consumption paradigm out of the marketplace, as well as the cable cutters.
Absolutely.
And let me ask you I think a very pertinent question, because this really comes back to the dollars and cents that we're dealing with in your focus. How is this funded? Well, I sense, and have you heard anything, I'm sure it's inevitably going to come to pass, you know, a lot of these access channels are using the internet for streaming. They're getting their content distributed for free. We really don't think we ought to give them 3% or 5% override out of the tariff anymore. Are you hearing those kinds of complaints yet? Because I think inevitably you will.
You hear that. I think those actually more are issues that we raise ourselves, about the fact that PEG stations do receive a percentage of fees from the cable subscribers, that the local communities and franchise fees also receive a percentage of revenues from the subscribers. And when those subscribers start going down, so do those fees. So that's something that we always address, like, what's next? How do we address those shortfalls that are coming down the pike? Especially with more and more programming going to over-the-top video, like you say, on internet. It's very difficult for local communities to receive any income when those services are put on, quote-unquote, the internet versus your cable operator. So those are things that we raise up, and we, at our annual conference and during a series of webinars we have every year, we talk about how can PEG operators operate on a shoestring. When they see their revenues go, how are they going to adapt to the new world? Do they start become a community media center so they can start training folks and earn income that way? Do they start filming promotional materials for local car dealers in their town to bring in more revenues? So it's a constant effort for our members to face the future, try to figure out what it is, and how do you survive as you move forward.
Well, the irony of the thing is that when you had a controlled number of outlets, i.e. frequencies in the VHF, UHF spectrum on television, or in the AM or FM band, you had a very controlled universe to deal with. So the value there was, in any given market, you had 15 FM channels and 20. Now, anybody can be everywhere in the world.
Oh, absolutely.
And so, how do you quantify tariffs based on that, especially in a market where the subscriber rate is dropping like a rock? And it's interesting to watch. I mean, all this stuff is very, very fascinating, because not only is it a business issue, not only is it a financial issue, but it's a social issue. That, you know, the Arab Spring was really pushed by social media. Mm-hmm. When you can get live events coming off of cell phones on a number of, you know, whether it's an Instagram channel or something like that, before they can get a news van out there, you just nullified that whole industry in that instance, in that case. So yeah, how do you fund it?
It's a difficult question, and you know, here's our little phone here. There are movies being filmed with iPhones nowadays. So the days where you had to have a large capital budget in order to pay for cameras and space and so forth and so on, nowadays, look at you. It's a one-man operation right here. You've got your keyboard, you've got your computer set up, and you can run it by yourself. it's a big financial change from what stations used to have to face.
Everything has changed. Now,
Everything's
if you
changed.
look at the Chasing New Jersey model for news, Murdoch instituted that, and the reporters go out and on iPhone 6s, record HD and record their own footage, upload it through your cell phone to the control room. Guys cut it and put the package together, and they come back and they do the wraparounds and talk about it. That's totally destroyed all the people that used to work in broadcast news in those settings. Is it good? Is it bad? It is. It doesn't matter whether it's good or bad. I think it's good in many cases that the more outlets you have, the more opportunity you get diverse opinions. And it was going in the other way with the consolidation after '86 of the Federal Communications Act, where they broke down those barriers where you couldn't have one organization own all the media outlets. That was totally against all the principles of broadcasting. Having said that, now that there are thousands of outlets available, now we have an opportunity to have diverse opinions. Whether it's garbage, whether it's biased, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent is up for everyone to decide. But at least you can't block the fact that somebody who's, a communist or a socialist or a Satan worshiper getting their word out. So
exactly.
To that extent, it is a very empowering grassroots capability. I don't know.
Even like 6 years ago, when I first became ED of NATOA, the idea that a PEG operation would want to stream their content was, no, we do not want to do that. We're a cable operator. We want to be on channel 5 or channel 3, whatever, and here's our programming. Now, 5, 6 years later, it's like people have realized you've got to stream. You've got to reach those new viewers. And the thing is, people move away from their hometowns, right? PEG operations are the ultimate local broadcast stories.
It's the local paper.
It's your high school, it's your local stores, it's what's going on in your community. Now you can move away, halfway around the world, go to the internet, and you can pull up and find out what's happening in Morristown.
It's interesting because I have literally streamed weddings and funerals. As crazy as that sounds, for people on the other side of the world that couldn't attend those events. I'll be doing one of the local high schools here next week, 2 weeks from now. I do a lot of high school graduations, colleges, because a lot of elderly grandparents can't travel, can't afford to travel, are medically infirm, or just don't. It's not worth it to sit in the bleachers for an hour to watch that 30 seconds of somebody getting a diploma, whereas they can watch a high-def program of it time and time again and enjoy it. There are so many applications of this technology, and the empowering vehicle, like so much that's changed our world more than any other technology other than electricity, in my mind, is the internet. So to struggle with how, here's a question that I've posed to people over the years. Where's this going to be in 5 years? Where's it going to be in 10 years? It's hard to imagine.
And that's what we continually tell the FCC when they come up with new ideas and new regulations. How do you know what's going to happen in 5 or 10 years?
Nobody.
You can't try to regulate something in the future because you're not doing a very good job with what's in the present.
Right.
I always relate it to, folks are really bad judging how many lanes do we need for a new freeway. Because when they put it in, you go, why don't they put in 2 or 3 more, because they're going to need them in a few years. But they never seem to do that. 5 or 10 years later, here they are digging up everything to put in more lanes.
And you were in California.
I was in California.
30 lanes doesn't matter. They're still all choked. It's not the issue.
You cannot keep up with technology and what's going to be demanded by consumers in the future. It's just almost impossible to do it. And if you can figure it out, good for you, because you're going to make a lot of money. But who knows?
So where are you going? What are your focuses? What are your Achilles heel? What are the issues that are always front burner for you folks for this community?
I think the biggest thing for us is, as we talked about, everything is on the internet. Everything is about broadband. And the important thing is making sure that everyone has access to that service. You still have a lot of rural parts of America that don't have good service. You have a lot of areas in urban centers that do not have good service, or it's too expensive. How do you make this absolutely necessary service available to everyone when probably I think it's like the top 500 companies now only take resumes online? If you don't have access, how do you apply for a job nowadays?
Don't get me started on that whole.
When schools when states say you have to offer online services to high school students, when they say you have to get rid of hardcover books and go to digital books, how do you make those books available to those who don't have services? So that's the challenge.
Well, and how do you justify the fact that we're number 18 in the Western world on overall internet service provision? Where countries like Morocco have much higher. Yeah, I know it's a different. Yeah. It's the size of a shoe stamp, but I mean, it doesn't matter. We're a joke. I mean, that held us up for 5 years because the last mile was lucky to get dial-up.
Exactly.
In 99% of the country.
But my response to that is, I don't really care what happens in another country. I care what's happening across the street or the city next to me. Why does City X have fantastic broadband connections and service, and I don't? Why is that acceptable?
Why do I live an hour from New York and an hour from Philly? And my local carrier, I might as well, I could get better service literally in the outback of Australia. I could get better phone, I could get better cable. We've been in this black hole of technology out there in West Jersey all my life. It's a joke.
Yeah.
There's no broadcast coverage, there's no local radio, there's no local television, and we're the Class C jerkwater ban on Philly and New York, and even Allentown in the Lehigh Valley. Yeah, and so that's what ticks me off.
And it should tick you off. It's like there's a lot of excuses why we're different from other countries. But again, why is Morristown different than New York City? Why don't they have the same services? What is going on here?
Well, and I think that there's a basic corruption in the system that says if we're not, the REA back in the 30s, the Rural Electrification Administration, made damn sure that a farm 30 miles out on a dirt road still had electricity.
Exactly.
They didn't get electricity that was 80 volts and burned up their refrigerator and their light bulbs. They got 110 or 120 volts, and that's what society paid for in this country. We all paid into it just like we pay in fire and rent. We don't have that in telecommunications. We don't have that basic floor that says, you know what, if you are going to be in this business, Verizon or Comcast or Time Warner or AT&T or any of a number of others, you're going to provide the minimum to everybody that you serve, or you're not going to be in business in this country. Go find another. We won't do that. So you're an attorney. You work with all the lawyers down there in D.C. It's all about money.
It's all about money.
And so I applaud you. It's not an easy task.
No, sir.
And, the vast majority of people, especially the elderly, who are forced to pay $60 or $80 or $90 for a cable package when they can hardly buy food and their copay on their Medicare, and they bundle this stuff together, so 90 channels you don't want to watch, you have to buy to get 3 that you do watch. This is nonsense.
Exactly.
So,
for me, getting cable service is like buying a used car. You always go home going, I think I got a terrible deal on that. Why did the guy next door get such a good deal and I got screwed?
Yeah, why does the next town have, fiber and I've got copper wire?
Why isn't it just nice and easy and everyone is treated the same?
Because we don't say it's a regulated monopoly anymore. It's not a regulated commodity. It's not a you don't fool around with the gas company and say, well, you don't have to give me enough pressure when it's cold out, so your heater may not work.
Right.
But I can't stream every time they load down the copper because the local company doesn't want to upgrade to fiber. Because they don't want to invest the money, because they're not making enough money on the pass buys.
I think what people have to understand is no longer just a nice little benefit of getting cable video service.
Right.
It's a necessity for almost everything you need to communicate, public service communications, everything else. So once folks realize that, maybe the mindset will start changing.
Keep the fight up. Thank you for being with us. I want to thank you again. It was a pleasure meeting with you.
Nice meeting you too.
Keep up the good work.
Hey.
Enjoy the rest of the conference. And folks, this is Bruce Pearson from the JAG conference here in Morristown, New Jersey. We'll be back after this break. And I want to thank Stephen Traylor for being with us from NATOA down in D.C. as the executive director. Thanks for your time.
Great. Thank you.
We'll be right back in just a second, so don't go away.